Welcome back, everyone. We're here in Vietnam at GEF Live during the GEF Assembly, and we're continuing our series of conversations with different leaders, thinkers, and professionals in this space who are tackling the big challenges we have in managing our global commons. And here today, I'm really thankful that you're here with us. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
This is Antonia Gawel, the head of the Circular Economy Initiative from the World Economic Forum. And so, just to start off, so we get all our listeners on the same page, what is the term circular economy and what does this mean?
Sure. So, well, first of all, pleasure to be here and thanks for having us. So the circular economy is very much about looking at our economy as really a circular process. So when we take resources out of the ground, we're using them for something, we're creating a product, but often today those products are being disposed of and those materials are not really being used effectively, and we're creating a huge amount of waste in that type of a system, which is currently our linear system. And so a circular system is saying, well, let's rethink that approach and let's think about not disposing of materials at the end of their kind of initial use, but actually keeping those materials in use for as long as possible and at their highest level of value as possible as well. So it requires redesigning products so that you can use them longer, repair them. Also the longevity of those projects, how well built are they, how well constructed, so that they can actually stay in our system. But also at the end of what might be their first use, how can you deconstruct those materials and those products that you can actually capture the resources and put them into a new product at the end of the day. So it's rethinking that whole system and approach, which then gets into kind of design, sort of business models, thinking about, are we selling a service or are we selling a product, really what do consumers want, and then also that recycling and recovery process as well.
Well, it sounds great in theory, and I think since this assembly is really about driving this to practice, what has been the role of your initiative in terms of shaping the GEF Assembly and its priorities moving forward?
Sure. So, I mean, I suppose the circular economy, as we described, is very much about changing an entire system. So we're looking at value chains, looking at the way that materials flow within rather than through our economy. And I think one of the things that the GEF has really been thinking about is that systems transformation perspective. So not just looking at individual kind of thematic areas, be it biodiversity or be it chemicals and waste, but what is the interconnection between these different issues that we really need to work on to help that system change at large. So specifically for us, I mean, we've been collaborating quite closely with the GEF on this. Now Koichi is a chair of an initiative that we've helped to build out called the Platform for Accelerating the Circular Economy, which basically recognizes that really to move towards a circular economy, you need that cross-sector collaboration, you need to think across these different value chains, but you also need to think about sort of different trade flows kind of from different markets in the world and very much engage all of those economies in that process. So I suppose we've been kind of really working together to think through how do you look at GEF projects in the context of public-private collaboration to help move towards a circular economy, for example, in plastics, in electronics, and in particular value streams as well.
Well, it's incredible to hear all the different ways that we are trying to chart out a new development path and model for the next generation and for the countries moving forward. And I kind of want to shift to something that you were involved with. You're an advisor to the Bhutan government, and they were the birthplace of the gross national happiness, which is a new measure for defining progress and development that I think many people were excited by, and it brought a lot of attention to how we measure development and how we then shape our institutions, our projects, our interventions around these measures. What was your experience like there, and what are some of the lessons that we can all take away from that?
Mm-hmm. I had the pleasure of spending about 2 years in Bhutan, which I can highly recommend to anybody. It is a beautiful country and truly unique as well. I mean, I think the thing, I mean, I suppose I learned a lot while I was there, but more than anything, there's a combination of, I would say, sort of the strategic approach that the government took and really the leaders. I mean, it was the king of Bhutan who sort of first put in place this notion that we're looking at sort of our people basically over our economy as the priority and the center point for development. Hence the emergence of this gross national happiness index and approach. And really for them, it is embedded within their policy-making process. So any policy that goes through and up to the Parliament for discussion gets vetted against a set of indicators to say, look, does this meet the social, the economic, and the environmental kind of thresholds that we deem as important to us as a country in progressing development on one hand. So that's sort of, I would say, the leadership and the embeddedness of those notions in policy processes, which is really important, which I think doesn't exist in many countries, unfortunately. But there's also a cultural aspect to it as well. And that's a slightly, I would say, more challenging one, because of course cultures evolve also, and I think there is very much a culture of a very strong cultural kind of frame in Bhutan, and that they're incredibly connected to each other and as a society, but also that culture is evolving in the sense that there's much more exposure to the outside, desire for new products, import of new products. And so I think it'll be interesting over the next kind of 10 years to see how really that progresses, because they are getting a lot more, for example, cars coming in, ownership coming in. So yeah, how do you balance kind of that desire for growth and opportunity for people with kind of maintaining that true kind of sense of priority around preserving, the happiness aspects, the environment, etc. So it's a really, I think, interesting philosophy. It's embedded in policy, but then the implementation in reality, I think, is always going to be a challenging thing in practice.
Yeah, and I guess something that's continuing to come up is the aspect of cultural change, evolution, and also the power of behavior and the decisions that we make to this conversation, because we can do as much as we want from a top-down level, but it's got to be aligned with the vision of sustainable development, the vision for societies and what people want. So I view young people as a really critical space, right? We're seeing them change their perceptions. It's different from the past generations. What role do you think that young people have in championing this new development agenda?
I mean, I think, young people and people in general are the ones who own and need to own the agenda, be it, within their own lives, but also just with their own values. I mean, I think we're very value-driven as people. I think what we do see for sure is, young people can make decisions. I mean, if we look at the issue of plastics, which, we're hearing about constantly at the moment, which is fantastic, is that young people can make decisions about what they buy. Do they want to buy kind of a plastic bottle, or actually, in many economies, the water that comes from the tap is perfectly fine. Will they recycle that bottle? It's really an individual decision where we have infrastructure to do so. We can make those decisions. And I think increasingly we are seeing, I would say, a movement in particular from young people who are making those decisions to take the right purchasing choices, to make the right purchasing choices as well. So I think we can all own this and also bring our peers along with us, because I think it's also about the power of the crowd, right? Yeah.
And you were involved in this kind of sustainability concept quite young, because you were nominated an award as a young leader in Canada. So what's kind of sparked your interest in your actions in this space?
I mean, I would say it's sort of driven by passion and interest more than anything. I mean, I think I grew up in Canada, which is a very kind of natural environment. Basically, I spend a lot of time outdoors. I climb mountains, I run in the mountains. I live right next to some of the glaciers in the Alps. And for me, I would say it's a kind of a passion for the outdoors. So I feel I know the intrinsic value of nature to me, but then also bridged with a fascination with the economy. So I look at the way that the economy functions, and there's really still this tension about how can we ensure that the environment is preserved, because I love it so much and I know the value that it brings in a place where we sit in the economic systems that we operate within. And so for me, it's always been about, okay, how can we bring together the businesses into this discussion, kind of the large corporations, bridged with governments in terms of some of the functions of government who are to kind of set those frameworks for how we operate, to really think about the solutions at the end of the day in a way that kind of meets the needs of the people, the population, but also understands that ultimately the natural environment that we live within is obviously important for me, but is important for our economy and our economic success as well. So I guess really it's just been driven by interest and exploring the solutions in this space.
That's amazing. And to close, I want to ask you, what's the best piece of advice you've been given and in your professional career?
I think the best piece of advice is just to, well, challenge yourself and also pursue the things that you're most passionate and interested in, and then you'll most likely be successful.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you everyone for watching and for engaging in this conversation with the hashtag GEFLive. We're going to continue to keep these conversations going, these interviews going, as we close out the GEF Assembly here in Vietnam. Thank you.